I will.
Okay.
Hey, this is Chadillac. You're back with the Cage Rage podcast. I'm here with my co-host, fight analyst McGill Iturrate, and we're talking about another tragedy in boxing. We've got an Argentina boxer that died from last weekend, the same show that Dadashev passed away in. We've got another guy. We've got another guy in the same weekend as Dadashev's death.
Yeah.
So
there were two deaths this past weekend. One in Argentina and one, the Dadashev death.
Yeah. So we've got even more fodder for the cannon, and here to talk about it. Miguel and I've been talking a lot about it off camera, and what's the solution to this, Miguel? Where do we start? Start to unpack this for me. Give me the basic details before we start anything. What happened?
Okay, first I want to point out, obviously we're looking at all the media and all the details that are out there from boxing's myriad of websites and things like that. And I want to give credit to Michael Rosenthal. He wrote a piece for the for the BoxingScene.com that basically detailed the death of Dadashev, Santillan, and a third thing that went on that I do think is related, and that's that Dillian Whyte tested positive for steroids 3 days before his fight with Oscar Rivas. This was a heavyweight fight for an interim belt, and the commission let him fight with a positive test.
Where was that one at?
In the United Kingdom, in England. Who they supposedly consider themselves, handling this stuff well. Now, how do you feel if you're Oscar Rivas, the opponent, that they knew that he had taken steroids, and they let him fight you, and he won the fight. He was hitting you. Rivas dropped Dillian Whyte in the fight and still lost the decision. But the point is his opponent was, on steroids, has been on steroids before, but he was on steroids, and the boxing commission knew it, and they let him fight. So the point is once again, this whole collect PP and Veda testing, and are they Veda testing? They're not Veda testing. This whole mummers farce needs to just go away, because you get embarrassing situations like this where the guy was allowed to fight anyway. So what's the point?
Okay,
right?
so
Miguel,
I know
finances that go towards that can help something real when a fighter goes down. That's all.
Okay, so I know we've got a lot to cover on this, but first and foremost, the first question that comes from that then is this. So you're saying you want to make steroids legal? That's the first thing you're going to hear when you say we need to stop collecting PP and start worrying about brain injuries. So is that what you're saying? Do you want to make steroids legal in sports, or at least in boxing?
I think that is a core question that does need to be answered correctly.
Yeah.
If you're going to have rules, you do have to enforce them. Part of the current problem in the state that we're in now is that we have rules and we have no way to enforce them. Who knows if there is any shenanigans out there where, a guy tests positive, but he's a powerful guy and he's not a guy that he's got friends and he's done the right stuff, behind the scenes and stuff, and it just gets crushed and we don't see it. Here's a situation where we know Eddie Hearn promotes Dillian Whyte, and Eddie Hearn's pretty powerful in England. You're looking at it, was this just lethargy on the boxing commission? Was this just because the boxing commission feels that the A test isn't enough to act, that they have to wait for the B test to come back before they can accuse a guy because they don't want to accuse a guy? I understand that. You don't want to accuse a guy of bad steroids and stuff like that. But please, be real. The A test came back positive 3 days before. This is exactly the type of situation where the fight should be canceled. But in this case, it wasn't. It was let to go through. What was the thought process behind that? Was it really that they were afraid of litigation, that they didn't, without the B test and the certainty that they didn't feel comfortable moving forward? Then they're a useless boxing commission in my book.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that somebody got an envelope and they said, okay, yeah, let it go. That's my thoughts on it. And that's what I've personally seen from commissions in the past. So that's what I'm going on.
Yeah, but unfortunately, there's all that. But here's the point: is once again, the system in this whole chasing steroid users and stuff fails. Now, I do think that under a new system where the fighters are allowed to use more than they're able to use now. There may be some substances that should remain banned. I don't, that can be discussed. But I think that what I'm talking about is having boxing commissions and populated by doctors and neurologists that are employees of the commission that take on the boxers that are licensed in their jurisdiction as a patient. And then there's a patient and fighter relationship where the fighter could say, yes, I've been taking this, that, and the other thing, and the doctor can monitor him and we can know about results. Because in this case, you get a guy who's a positive test right now, and what's the doctors do? Nothing. They look at the form and they say, yeah, it's in your blood and you got 6 months, 9 months, a year. That's not what a doctor should be doing. A doctor should be saying, all right, look, give me some info. How long have you been doing this shit? What have you felt? You're getting stronger, you're getting faster, you're getting,
Let's test your endocrine system.
Yeah. Let's see what it's actually doing to you inside. Let's get some numbers and check it. And then I think you're in a situation where now that the doctors aren't part of a policing process, now you're back into a situation there where you've got some trust, So what are things that are currently broken now? We talked about this in one of the other podcasts. Like, I think that the doctor should know, I'm here on fight week. I'm weighing 190 and I got to get to 147.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be a big difference, wouldn't it?
Because right now, a lot of the camps come and they won't tell you their initial weight. They won't tell you how much they're starting to do. No. And when you ask them, as I have, they can become concerned that I'm going to go tell the opponent, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I think that you do need that doctor-patient relationship where there's trust. So you got to know the other guy's got his own doctor, and they're dealing with it.
So in other words, there's got to be confidentiality in this.
Yes,
right?
And they need to know. So it's a difficult execute, but they need to know that they can trust the doctor on the commission to take care of them, right? So now then they can say all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I took steroids. It's like, as a matter of fact, this other guy took steroids and this other guy, I don't know how this stuff gets lined up, but this other guy, your opponent also happens to be on some steroids too. And his are all about punching power, so don't get hit in the head as much. Think about that for your strategy. But
I don't know, that might be jumping a little too far, but let's back up a little bit, Miguel. So
no, because the doctors would know what the guys are on.
Well, okay.
The guys are doing, right? Now, all of this is meant so that if the guy in the ring goes down, that there's a doctor there that can grab him as a patient, and they've got more information than our doctors currently have in order to prevent. Could Dadashev have been saved? They induced a coma. Normally that means, okay, he's going to stabilize and we can keep him there for a little while and stuff, Yeah. So could he have been saved, but with a doctor who would be able to apply more medical techniques, more information?
Go
ahead.
Let me ask you a little bit about Dadashev. McGirt stopped the fight. So when Buddy stopped the fight, you were telling me to talk about what you were saying that he had told the doctors about round 9.
Well, okay. The situation is this: is once again, Buddy McGirt correctly has been getting credit for stopping the fight before round 12. This fighter wanted to go into round 12. Now, keep in mind they stopped it in round 11. He left the ring, and before he made it to the back, he threw up. So I don't know if we were that close to a situation where a guy might have been throwing up in the ring, or might have been having some real type of problems in the ring. But it was close. But Buddy McGirt noticed something, and he stopped the fight. Now, in retrospect, Buddy McGirt said around round 9 is when he first noticed that something, the kid was messed up, or something was wrong. And the problem is that even in round 11, when he stopped it, the kid wanted to go in. He wanted to fight. He wanted to keep fighting.
Right.
So from round 9,
tell me this, Miguel. Why, if in round 9 McGirt sees it, why doesn't the doctor see it in 9?
I think that right there is one of the core problems, is that the doctors are there not with a patient-doctor relationship officially, where it's like, that's my guy, that's my patient, I'm assigned to this guy in this way, that I got to be on top of this stuff. They do they watch the fights in detail to know? It's like, now this guy, when he's not reacting well, he's reacting slow, his knees are locking up. I don't like his neurological responses in that last round. Or in round 2, round 3, man, this fight is really getting to be a grind. Let me just stay on top of it and keep an eye on it. Now, I'm sure some doctors and some commissions do, may even keep notes, but not enough of them do. They don't do that as their work. There have been times where I've seen doctors on cell phones.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say.
Doctors in the celebrity mode of, hey, yeah, the doctors get to sit up front with the ring girls and take pictures and stuff like that. And a lot of the times at these shows, if everything goes well, they really don't have a lot to do. And then when it becomes a show, and I think that whole thing is, the doctors that whole thing is being on your cell phone, taking pictures, and being a celebrity doctor kind of thing at the fights. All that's nonsense. That needs to go away. They need to do a job, and that job is to protect the guys. And the guys, could be perfectly fit going into the ring, and there's still going to be one day a trauma like Dadashev again. And I'm talking about just having the system geared toward maximum preparation for that moment, not for a guy that took a diuretic because he's trying to cut the last 2 pounds of weight.
Well, look, we had this happen in Chicago, just 2.5 hours north of me, last year or the year before, I don't remember now. Small show. Our friend Mike Davis could probably tell you a lot about this. We should have him on. And a kid that lived there in Chicago, really urban kid, didn't have a lot of fighting experience. I believe it was MMA, and he started acting funny, and he died. And when they replayed the show, when they showed it on Facebook and whatever, and they show the kid staggering around and weird things happening, the coroner's not paying any attention to him. The doctor is on his cell phone and talking to girls around him, literally just like you're saying. And no one, the referee, is over doing other things, talking to people on the side, doing other stuff that, no one is paying attention to the fighter. And this kid's literally staggering around the ring, and then he dies. And he was 19 or 20 years old, a black kid from Chicago, dead. And nothing. There's nothing now. And nothing changed. Nothing's any different. So tell me this. Chicago, Las Vegas, Argentina, United Kingdom, I don't care where you're at. Give me the solution, step one. And let me also say that I like that you said that there needs to be a doctor that has the fighter as his patient, not just right. I'm a fight doctor watching a fight.
Right. I think that, and Jesus, something happened. Get this guy to a hospital and out of my hands as soon as possible, man. I don't want anything to do with this.
Right.
Overwhelming.
There's no accountability.
Yeah. And the system is built that way. And I think that's a little bit of the, that's the problem. So we're talking about a culture change first. The culture change is that the medical, that we have to really say, okay, if a guy takes steroids and he's able to perform at such a peak, he might, have more of a chance to harm or hurt or even kill his opponent because of his peak condition and because of the enhancements and stuff like that. But the problem is that there's so much structure being put in towards policing all of that situation. And we're still left with the same thing, which is even if a guy's not on steroids, or if he is on steroids and we missed it, but they're in the ring, there is going to be a moment where somebody's going to take a shot and there's going to be damage and there's going to be a situation like we had. It happened 1,000 times in the last century, about 10 times a year in boxing. So the bottom line is
10 people dying every year in boxing alone.
Just in
that we know of. That we know of.
So here's the situation is very simple. Is that I think to me is the maximum situation is getting those fighters as much help, because for everyone that passed away, there's probably a handful that are in a vegetative state that are being taken care of and are still alive, but then they'll really become forgotten. And the thing is I think, once you have a doctor who's able, so my thought is that if Buddy McGirt noticed it in round 9, my thought is a doctor monitoring a fight who's neurology trained and who knows the fighter because he's examined them. And we're talking about a good neurological exam of about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. It's not a 5-minute knock on the knee and go away.
Right.
So they got to know the guy. So he knows the guy. And he goes, all right, this is the guy I was worried about for this reason. His left eye didn't react well. I didn't want to cancel the fight because it's not, but his left eye is something I want to keep an eye on. And now he keeps getting walloped on his left side. I got to keep an eye on this. I just don't think that every doctor associated and assigned to every fight walks into that building with that acumen. And I think that's a cultural change that starts everything.
Should there be a medical class that doctors have to pass so that they better understand boxing, the punishment of it, and I'll
tell you one other thing though. I'll tell you one thing that has to happen, and again, if in the current world, if a promoter is trying to step over a doctor's decision in order to make a fight happen because of whatever the promoter's needs are, that promoter should be facing a criminal charge. Any attempt to circumvent we're protecting the guy stepping into the ring at the last moment. And I don't think anybody has that attitude, because at the end of the day, it's like when you hear the promoters do that, everybody thinks, oh, sure, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's going to happen, right? No. The point is the doctors have to be the most important person monitoring. And again, you can't have a doctor who's like, you can't. It's like, well, my attitude is they're all a little bit banged up, so I don't approve anybody, and there's no boxing in my state. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, because those men will just go to another state. So I'm talking about, you call the state where the men have come from boxing, you get the medical records, and you start yourself a doctor-patient relationship where it's like, all right, this next card, I get 6 patients, there's 12 fights, I get 6, he gets 6, we have 4 neurologists here, so we each get 6, and hey, start the envelope, start the patient, start the file, call the other boxing commission, get the files from them, have them sent through the databases that they're linked, right? I mean, we're in the 21st century, I think, right? So that's my thought. At least that way you can know, did Dadashev show any signs of any of this prior to the fight?
Okay, so
and if not, and he still went into the ring, then at least that that he was basically very, very well protected, and that the doctor knows him pretty intimately.
Yeah, so the data exchange is not a problem. We have technology to do all of that.
Well, it is a problem when no one's collecting the data.
Well, that's not what I'm getting at. But so we can easily solve data exchange issues. So there's no problem there. We have the tools and the capabilities to do this, and not all of it is vastly expensive MRI machines, CTs that have radiation and things like that. A lot of it comes down to just neuro testing, basic functionality tests where they put pins in holes and pick colors at the right time, etc. So we know we can do that. All of that can be done through a neurologist.
And a doctor stepping in and saying, that's my patient, I know him better than anybody. That's what I want.
Okay. So here's the $100,000 question, or the $1 million question. Who pays for this? How do we afford it?
Well, like I said, this is already, there is a certain amount of resources around every show that go towards licensing, medicals, and this, that, and the other stuff. Some fighters have it taken out of their purses. Some fighters bring the exams and stuff like that. but they're having to pay a doctor and stuff like. Maybe have a doctor who does it for free or whatever. But there's a cost to all of this, and then once they get to the state has doctors on file to validate and review the paperwork and determine if it's good. I don't know that they're engaging the fighter, and they're the fighter. They're the people on the ground, right? So I don't know. You'd have to really have a panel and look at some details and stuff. But I would think that fighters bringing their own medicals should be something that would raise antennas. It also opens up to a lot of potential forgeries and things like that, as everybody who's been around shows long enough has seen at some point or another. We know that the boxing commission catches some forgeries, and we know that they don't catch all of them. So
absolutely.
So the doctors are there going through paperwork. Basically, they're clerks. They're not really hands-on with the fighters, except for maybe a pre-fight exam or whatever. Maybe there's some neurological aspect to that exam, but more or less, I've seen it too. What they're looking for is like broken bones in the hand, see if the guy's hiding anything like that and things like that. So those exams, like I said, there's nothing about those exams that makes me feel that it makes me feel like what happens in those exams, and I've been around a lot of shows, is I get the feeling we're checking off a list. I get the feeling we're saying, hey, he's done, and that there isn't really the idea of when this guy goes into the ring, if he never comes out on his own 2 feet, we've got doctors who are assigned and know that could happen, and they are ready to take that on. Not what we have now. And I'm just wondering if with the induced, I'd be much, it's like, I don't know. I'd be much happier. I don't know. How do you quantify emotions in this situation? Would it be better if Dadashev was still in a coma? At least there's
not for me, but I don't know that.
Because the idea is that, to me, the coma, there's a shred of hope, right? And the doctors, that have taken him and gotten him through to that position might still be with him working on it and stuff like that. And there's some benefit to it, I don't think we're ever going to not lose people in the sport. And that's the thing, but banning the sport isn't a good solution, and some of the other ones aren't, I think, preparing for it. And at the very least with neurologists there, and you could say, okay, the neurologist we're going to listen to, Dadashev's neurologist, the guy assigned to his case, his doctor. When have we ever heard an interview with a doctor that says, that his doctor can, and I don't know. I think that would be a better situation than we're in now. We're now, there's no accountability, there's no nothing. And you know what? There's 2 dudes still talking about Dadashev, me and you.
Yeah, and no one's talking about the kid from Argentina.
Thanks to Mike Rosenthal for bringing that up, in the mainstream media and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a scary, bad situation, because when everybody's like, well, we hope it doesn't happen, and and it's a rarity and stuff like that. But when it happens, it leads to boxing at its most ugly.
Well, and then here's the other thing, Miguel. They don't have to die or even be in a coma to suffer massive amounts of brain injury that doesn't pronounce itself until far after their boxing career is over.
Oh, sure, yeah. And then
so that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And if we started studying this now, and we really put some resources behind it, like if the federal government of the United States of America said, you know what, we want to know more about brain injury overall. We want to know more about brain injury so that we can treat our veterans better. We want to know more about brain injury so that when children get hurt, we know a better way to help them. If we actually put funding towards medical research the way we used to, this kind of a problem, it's not going to go away, but it could be certainly minimized. Now, okay, so
you hit it on the head. It's not going to go away. So now that is one of the things that we have to accept in the looking for a solution. That
so
we
what
are
about this one?
Towards a situation where we can address that trauma when it happens in the best way possible, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, so let me interrupt you and ask you this one then, because here's the next thing that people say. They signed the paper. They got in the ring. They chose to do it. They wanted it. Like you said, Dadashev wanted to go back out and fight that 12th round.
Hey,
what are you going to say to that guy? What's your answer to that?
You know, I'd probably poke the guy in the eye, pro wrestling style, and just not talk to him anymore. You know what I mean? The guy's an idiot. I mean, the problem is this.
Yeah, but that's a very real answer. That's a very real answer. They signed the paperwork. I've had coaches say it to me. You break that arm, they signed the release.
I understand, but all they're trying to do is cover their own asses. I'm going to say something to you, and if it's too harsh, I apologize up front and move on and stuff. But hey, your mom chose to crawl out from that stop sign.
Yep.
Fuck it. You know? No, the problem is once it's happened, I'm not looking to place blame in any of it.
Yeah.
I'm looking to address the new problem that we have.
Yeah.
That's the thing is the addressing of blame. Oh, yeah, sure. He knew what he was doing, but you know, maybe the opponent was on steroids and he's stronger. Wasn't ready for that, you know? I don't know, you know? I think if everything was disclosed and you knew, hey, that guy's the steroid guy, I'm not fighting him. Or there are other guys that say, I really don't care, you know? And that's the thing is because it's individual, I think the chasing of steroids, you'll get guys who feel like, yeah, they're protecting me because they don't want, you know, my opponent to come and kill me on steroids. But then you get other guys that are like, you know, I really don't care my opponent's on steroids. So,
you know,
the steroid thing is just a false flag. It eats up resources. It breaks the relationship with the doctors and the fighters because they're now pursuing and hiding things from their doctors. And I'm trying to change that whole thing, because if the guy goes into the ring and goes down there and can't get up, we need the doctors to have had more information and more details on these guys. They go into public periodically to go do this, and yet you might have a doctor's file that's empty. How could it be empty information about this guy who's in the public, you know? So it's like, I just want more information for the doctor. If you have their neurological exams throughout their career, a doctor could look at the recent one that he just did and say, man, he really is not responding well, or not responding the way he used to, clearly all the way through. You know, and right now, you get the impression that if the doctors had that information, half of them wouldn't even read it. And that's the point, that's why it's got to be their job. That's why they have to have established with the boxer a patient-doctor relationship, so that they know that they have to do their full job, not let me get out of here without getting sued.
Right. So by the way, the doctor that was on call in the Chicago incident was a chiropractor. So I think you're dead on when you're talking about having a neurologist on staff as the doctor instead of, you know, a general practitioner that, you know, generally writes antibiotics and treats attention deficit disorder. Because there's a vast difference between a neurologist and a general practitioner, right? So that's why they send you to a specialist in particular situations. They don't have a hand doctor work on your head. So yeah, any doctor can look at your hands and go, well, yeah, you got a broken bone there, or, you know, we're going to get an X-ray on that.
And I don't mean to be offensive, but a chiropractor is not even a full doctor. Like, I mean, they're not.
No, they're not. They're not a medical doctor at all.
So that
they do, they do a great job at what they do, but that is not medicine.
No, but
it's not the same thing.
But even I don't even want to get into that argument. Other than that, how does a chiropractor meet the qualifications to be a commissioned doctor?
Don't ask me. Talk to Chicago.
I mean, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of problems, and there's just that. A lot of, stopgap measures of like, well, what are we going to do? It's like, well, shoot, in the 80s, it's like, well, we'll have to do HIV testing. Okay, that's great. So now you got old men collecting blood, and a doctor who's looking at a form that says plus or minus. That's all a doctor does. The guy bought his HIV test. One guy bought it, and 3 guys made copies at Kinko's, submitted it, and the doctor looks at the plus minus.
Yep. I've seen it happen. I know for a fact a guy that competed in a show that was hepatitis positive and went there and bled everywhere. And I was stunned. I when I heard he was fighting, I said, he can't fight. He had hepatitis. Oh no, they cured that. And this was before there was a cure for hepatitis. But anyways,
okay.
So besides that,
let me get the story off here. Bottom line is I was at a show and I had a camp with 3 fighters approach me and let me know that they had submitted forged paperwork to the boxing commission.
Yep.
Later that day, the boxing commission approached me and said, "Hey, look, we had some forgeries. We're canceling some fights." Naturally, and I'm like, "All right, no problem." You know, I mean, that's the way it goes, right? The guys they caught and the guys they canceled were not the guys that came forth to me and said. So those guys submitted false paperwork that was approved. So with that in mind, that may be a singular experience. I doubt it. And that's the problem, is that should never happen. Doubt it. It should never happen. Not once. And the problem is, again, now you've got a doctor who's checking forms, you know, from a guy in Minnesota, you know, a guy in Brazil. Can you imagine that? A guy in Brazil, a Brazilian doctor sending, you know, his neurological exam with his notes without having a commission interfacing and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's not, I think the aim, we all say, the fighter's safety.
It's a dog and pony show.
We all say, the fighter's safety comes first. Until that's really the truth, then we're going to be in the same boat.
Agreed. So finally, you know, we've talked about implementation. Okay, we've talked about, first of all, what needs to happen. We need to have certified neurologists on staff, full-time, 1 in each corner, that know the fighters, that have sat down and talked with them and done in-depth interviews with them and really spoken to them and learned who these fighters are, who've watched their fights, who've watched them grow, who've done these things. The expenses we talked about next, because that's kind of the next thing that happens is, well, what about the expense? Who's going to pay for it? Well, that's to be determined, but we've got a good start by, we don't collect PP anymore. And then you have, of course, the question that comes up, well, what do you want to do? Make all steroids legal then? All drugs are supposed to be legal? And that's going to come up too, which is more important, a fighter dying or a fighter's PP has steroids in it. If you're just honest and you say, this fighter has steroids, this fighter doesn't, as long as both fighters agree to fight, it's fine, which 90% of them will. And steroids can actually slow some people down. Heavy muscle burns heavy fuel. So, you know, there's a lot, there's advantages and disadvantages to all of that stuff. We should be looking at not whether they're taking steroids, but what's happening to their bodies as they're taking steroids. And then finally we get to, well, he signed the paper, he got in there, he did it. So there's that. So there's one other question I have for you then, and we'll wrap this one up. What about accountability? Because like you said, all of these things are going on and no one's really accountable for it. And what do we have the goddamn commission for if they're not doing anything? Should a lot of the funding be taken and we hire neurologists straight out of college, straight out of medical school? We put them into this position and they are specialists as neurologists. They are sports neurologists, specialists. It forms its own group of medical care. There are jobs waiting to be filled. They can't be filled fast enough. The state pays them a good salary to do this. And then on top of that, they earn on, you know, maybe they get partially on ticket sales. Well, I guess you can't really do that, but there's some way to work around that. And then we have accountability, but who else is accountable?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is accountability implies I'm trying to make it blameless, So if all things are monitored and fair, and we're aware of everything going on, in terms of what they're doing and intaking and things like that, then I think you started so that the fighter can say to the doctor, "Look, hey, this is what's going on," and they have a real doctor-fighter relationship. Until then, you've got the fighters trying to be coy and avoid. You got fighters that feel they want to use their own doctors, and all that sort of stuff is I think combative. I think you put fighters on edge. I think that the doctors really have to come forth and be like, the pure guys in here. It's like they're here to just keep these things going so that you guys can be as safe as possible. And if a tragedy happens, that we're as ready to respond to it as possible. That's the second part, is the key part that has to be added that's not there now, is once the tragedy does happen, that we've got the maximum amount of information and we can help you out as much as possible and try to take care of it,
Yeah, because with Dadashev, what actually took his life was the microbleeding that they didn't catch deeper inside of the cortex. So they saw microbleeding on the outside of the cortex. So when they cut his head open, they peeled skin back to look at the skull. They could see that there was pulsation problems with the veins, that they were popped, but they didn't look more deeply, and I don't understand why. Or maybe they did and they just hadn't released it publicly. But publicly they released he has a very good chance of coming through this. And it sounded, we said when we very first talked about this on the first podcast, it sounded like he was going to make it through and things were going to be okay. And we said not usually, but often that turns into the worst case scenario rather than the other where they give you the worst case scenario and it turns out better than expected. So how do we keep a McClellan kind of situation from happening or a Dadashev situation from happening? And I think you've answered a lot of that to some degree, but we also have to accept that this is the hurt game. And in the hurting game, there are always going to be some casualties. Is that fair?
Absolutely. That's the problem. Is we can do we're never going to prevent it all. It could be perfect scenario beforehand where the fighter's in perfect shape, nothing showing on his tests, everything like that, and he can still walk into the ring and have this happen. And when it happens now, what we have is the medical profession looking, to stay unaccountable really and not have a problem, not get sued, not, be such a case that boxing gets banned or scrutinized or looked at or anything like that. They try to mourn for 2 days and then hush it up kind of thing is what it seems like,
It's a lot like the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, money and those types of interests are all there and everybody likes to make money and stuff like that. But the situation is I think that's what gets trumped a lot. You know what I mean? It's like the reason to make money, yeah, the guy's in there, maybe he's feeling himself like he's not neurologically all there. But he's going to get in the ring anyway and fight because he needs the money. So, yeah, that's where, are we protecting them? Are we protecting, who's getting protected when, is it the promoters? Like, if the fight goes on, the promoters are being protected. It's their interest. The fight gets canceled, it was the fighters, but, they may protest it as well because their income and this, that, and the other stuff. So it's the worst of the worst situation when it comes to the sport. But the problem I see in it now is that every time it happens, it's just this act of looking bad, hoping nothing blows up, and then moving on. And nothing ever really gets done, and people keep, dying. So I'd like to see the medical profession work a little harder to keep people alive.
One other question I have for you is this: then now in Dadashev's case, we know this is not the case, that he was the favored, but I wonder, and all you graduate students out there, here's a great thesis for you to work with. I gotta wonder how many of the deaths and how many of the severe brain injuries and the severe injuries that came in boxing came from a guy who was negative 3,000 fought a guy who was plus 4,500. Do you know do you know anything about any of that, or is that another show?
That's a lot of detail, and a case by case basis over the course of years. Do you do it with injured guys as well as guys that passed away and stuff like that? So yeah, I think you're looking at a high level thesis type of document that could be done there. I do think it warrants an examination. Although in the case of Dadashev, he was in a competitive fight fighting another fighter at 13-0, so I doubt the odds were of that ilk. You mentioned Joe McClellan's case. Joe McClellan was, a world championship level fighter fighting Nigel Benn. Nigel Benn, also a world champion. So you're talking about, elite guys there. It just happened to happen to Gerald, I think. Doesn't matter if Ben or McClellan was favored in that fight. Once again, that one, I think it was pretty even going in on paper. No one expected that. So I think it could pop up in any type of situation or going either way. I would tend to think off the top of my head that that's probably the way the study would go, that you'd find that the underdog hurt the favorite in the fight in a considerable number of the situations.
Well, that's interesting, and maybe it's a topic we can discuss at another time. Hey, I'm Chadillac. That's McGill Iturrate, and this has been the CRP looking at boxing and another very bad weekend. Our condolences to the families of both of these boxers. And this is something that's going to continue to happen, and we need to really start looking seriously. This is the 21st century, and we at the CRP believe that it's time to start seriously looking at a holistic change in the commission, in how we manage fighter safety in and out of the ring, and what we can do to better increase the odds of these things not happening. Anything you want to say before we sign off, Miguel?
No, I just, as you stated, the Santillan family, the Dadashev family, our deepest condolences. Please, hopefully you can find strength in these types of circumstances and things like that. And hopefully the sport reacts and these particular deaths don't turn out to be for nothing like so many others have in the past.
Until next time, namaste.